Hey everybody, I apologize in advance for my voice sounding funny, but I caught laryngitis when I was at the New York Auto Show, but I wanted to get the video of the Tesla Model 3 out just as soon as possible. So we're just going to struggle on through my voice today. Now in this video, we're going to be talking mainly about the standard range model, which is the model that we bought right here. This is the $35,000 Tesla Model 3. Plus a $1,000 paint option. So this one is a $36,000 Tesla. In this video, we are not going to be talking too much about Tesla's business practices, all that sort of stuff. We're going to save that for another video. Instead, we're focusing just on the car. Tesla decided to go in a different styling direction with the Model 3 than the Model S. So we don't have that fake grille oval that we saw up front when the Model S first launched. Instead, we get the look that we're seeing right here. Now personally, I think that the original Model S is a little bit more attractive than what we see here in the Model 3, but this is definitely a distinctive look. We have full LED headlamps with LED turn signals, as you can see flashing over there on that other side, and you'll notice down here we have LED fog lamps. These were not supposed to be standard in the least expensive Model 3, but they actually ended up being standard because what we actually have here is a $35,000 standard range plus. As we'll talk about in the pricing section, that ultimately means that if you can get your hands on an absolute base Model 3, the overall value proposition is actually better than we had anticipated. Tesla's pricing lineup changes very frequently, so be sure and check out Tesla.com to see which versions are actually available when you're watching this video. The standard range model, which is theoretically what we're driving right here, again, standard range plus with a few software limitations, this is available at this moment only by phone or in person at a Tesla store. If you want to configure your Model 3 online, you only have the option of the Standard Range Plus and then the Long Range Battery Pack. The Mid-Range Battery Pack has also been removed from online ordering. As you can see, this model has the base aero wheels. These are actually alloy wheels, as we'll talk about in a bit. The Model 3 is a traditional sedan. It is not a liftback like the Model S, so we actually have a regular old trunk lid back here. At 184.8 inches long, this is very solidly a compact luxury sedan in America. This is actually a little bit shorter than a Volkswagen Jetta and a full 8 inches shorter than a Camry or the Accord, but it is almost exactly the same size as its direct competition. The Lexus IS, the BMW 3 Series, the Genesis G70, the Mercedes-Benz C-Class, etc. As I've said before, electrification makes for strange bedfellows, but the fact that this comes in a $35,000 form doesn't necessarily make it a mainstream vehicle, because there are $35,000 BMWs, $35,000 Lexuses, $35,000 Mercedes, etc. So having a $35,000 entry from Tesla does not necessarily make this a Camry or an Accord competitor, or a competitor from one of those mainstream brands that happens to be electrified. The big difference between the Model 3 and something along the lines of a Camry or an Accord is going to be overall interior space. And I'm not talking about EPA passenger volume, which is what some folks have asked about. We do have a parcel shelf back there, which is pretty large, and then we have a large area of dashboard right there. Those help improve the overall EPA passenger volume, but that doesn't mean that the Model 3 has the kind of legroom that you would find in a Camry or an Accord or a Passat. While we're looking at the side of the Model 3, one of our viewers asked, are these really hubcaps? The answer is yes, but to my knowledge, this is the only car that has both alloy rims and hubcaps, because you can actually pull these guys off. You do it carefully without breaking it right there, and then we actually find a set of quite attractive rims behind. You can get caps for these bolts and then a center hubcap right there if you want to, or you can always use these aero hubcaps. These are going to improve overall efficiency versus taking them off and leaving this wheel showing, but you do have the option straight from the factory of just pulling this off if you want that look. Out back, we find full LED tail lamp modules. You can see that the turn signal is a red element over there on that other side. The backup lights are also LED elements. We also have well-integrated parking sensors, both front and rear, as standard equipment. And the overall look definitely fits in with the luxury segment. The luxury segment is generally defined by restrained and elegant styling, not truly adventurous styling. Talking about Model 3 motivation is a little bit tricky because we don't have complete details on the motor that the base version is using. We know that the long-range rear-wheel drive is using a 283 horsepower electric motor in the rear. The long-range all-wheel drive augments things with a 197 horsepower motor up front, but then drops that motor in the back down to 252 horsepower. If you get the performance all-wheel drive version of the Model 3, it uses the same motor up front, but then returns to the 283 horsepower motor in the back. So my guess is that the Standard Range and Standard Range Plus are using the 252 horsepower motor from the regular all-wheel drive version of the Model 3. But again, we don't have direct confirmation on that just yet. The lack of detail makes comparisons a little bit tricky because most of the other manufacturers do give us complete motor specs when it comes to horsepower and torque. So perhaps it's best to think of the Model 3 in terms of its overall performance numbers. The standard version, which is again what we have here, goes 0 to 60 in 5.6 seconds, and we have verified that this model is software limited to that performance statistic. If you get Standard Range Plus, then you get 5.3 seconds 0 to 60. The mid-range model, which is no longer available theoretically, went 5.2 seconds 0 to 60, the long range in 5 seconds, the all-wheel drive long range in 4.5, and if you want to get the performance model, that will do it in a blistering 3.2 seconds. The Model 3 was designed to accommodate 3 different battery packs. At the moment, 2 of them are on sale. The model that we're looking at here has a 50 kilowatt hour usable battery pack. There's also a 75 kilowatt hour usable battery pack in the long range and the performance version. The canceled battery pack was the one that slotted right in the middle at 62 kilowatt hours. Now there is a bit of debate as to whether the Standard Range and Standard Range Plus are actually using a 55 kilowatt hour battery pack. We can neither confirm nor deny that at this time, but I can say that this pack going from 1% all the way up to 100% did consume approximately 50 kilowatt hours of electricity, so this is definitely a 50 kilowatt hour usable pack. One thing we're not quite sure at this point in time is whether Tesla has actually software limited this particular battery pack at all versus the other Standard Range Plus models out there. So this 240 miles of range indication on the infotainment system may actually reveal that this actually has the same capacity overall as Standard Range Plus shoppers. Charging the battery pack happens behind this charge door right here. It does use the proprietary Tesla charge connector in North America. If you get this in Europe, then you'll actually see a different charge connector right there behind that door. Personally, I wish that Tesla would actually use the SAE standard connector. I think it would just help harmonize things in America a great deal. But at the moment, this is definitely one of the faster charging EVs out there. 7.7 kilowatts is the rating on the standard charger in the model that we have here. If you get the bigger battery, then they bumped it up to 11.5 kilowatts. That's a pretty big differentiator between the Model 3 and something like a Jaguar I-Pace, because not only is this significantly more efficient than an I-Pace, it also has a faster AC charger. So you're going to gain range considerably faster than the Jaguar if you're just charging at home. And of course, if you're charging at a DC fast charge station, then this model will charge much, much faster if you can find a version 3 supercharger station. The bigger battery in the Model 3 can charge up to 255 kilowatts at those latest supercharger stations. This model right here appears to be limited to 101 to 102 kilowatts. That means that if you are shopping for the smaller battery pack in the Model 3 and Tesla does not update anything via software, then those V3 supercharger stations aren't going to make too much difference to you. I did spend some time at supercharger stations around the Bay Area. We deliberately drove this all the way down to just a few percent charge and then went all the way up to 99% charge just to chart out exactly how fast this battery was charging. And the peak, as you can see on your screen, does happen right down there at the bottom of the battery, just like we see in all EVs. And this one tops out right there around 100 kilowatts. Although the charge connector is proprietary, Tesla does have an adapter to allow you to go from the Tesla charging connector to a J1772 charging connector. This is the one you're going to find out there in most public charging areas. It actually is the most popular charging connector in America right now. Tesla also has an optional CHAdeMO charge connector adapter that allows you to use the charge stations that Nissan Leafs, the last generation Soul EV, and some Mitsubishi EVs use, but it is not the newer charge connector available in America. We don't know when or if there will be an adapter available to go from the SAE combo connector in America to the Tesla connector. Tesla does provide us with a very handy charger standard with the vehicle. This one has 2 plugs right here, so you can see we can pull off the 110 volt plug and put on a 240 volt plug. This adapter does fully support a 32 amp charge. So the charge cord that comes with the car can actually charge this Model 3 just as fast as it is supposed to from the factory. This touch is not unique in the EV world, but it is one that is definitely appreciated. I also love the slimness of this Tesla power adapter. As I said before, the reason that I chose to buy the absolute base version of the Model 3 was because I wanted to see what that long-claimed $35,000 Model 3 would be all about. But as you can see here, the model that was promised isn't exactly what I ended up getting. I did end up getting that software limited Standard Range Plus. And one of the things that is software limited versus the Standard Range Plus that you'll see right now if you were to buy one is that we don't have autopilot on this particular model, but we still have a suite of active safety systems. We still have collision warning with autonomous braking, we still have auto high beams, and a form of blind spot monitoring. But unlike other vehicles out there, Tesla does not put blind spot monitor readouts on the mirrors or in lights on the inside of the cabin. Instead, we just have it there in the infotainment screen, and then if you try and actually change lanes into someone, if you go to that next level, then it will actually alert you. But just simply turning on your turn signal, it won't actually bing at you to let you know there's something in the blind spot. Now, when we're talking about the autopilot system, it is important to remember that this is a hands-on semi-autonomous system. This is not self-driving, this is not Cadillac Super Cruise, this is lane keeping assistance and all those other features taken to the next level. But it is still a system where you're supposed to keep your hands on the steering wheel according to Tesla. If you want that next level of automation, the claimed full self-driving package, then that is a $5,000 option on top of the Standard Range Plus and the other models. Tesla says that you'll be able to option that into your car later for $7,000. Theoretically, we could also option into autopilot or the full self-driving on this car, but we don't know exactly how much that combination of packages will cost us. No Tesla would be complete without a frunk, so let's start out our cargo look up front. I can open the frunk remotely with the app right here on my phone. I'm actually a little sad that there isn't some sort of button somewhere around here to open the frunk remotely from the front. This cargo area is about 2.7 cubic feet or so. This is where you can keep your charge cord that comes with the car. And you can also put a 22-inch roller bag right in there like that, and then that will just barely fit right there in that cargo area. As with many electric and hybrid vehicles, the one thing you won't find back here is a spare tire. There's really not anywhere back here in the trunk to put one either if you wanted to aftermarket. That underfloor storage well is just not large enough overall to accommodate a spare tire, and it doesn't look like the frunk really is either. At this point in time, we should probably talk about what the Standard Range model was supposed to get as standard equipment, and then what we actually got for our $35,000 in this model right here. Theoretically, the Standard Range model was supposed to give us manual seats, manual steering wheel adjustment, basic audio, whatever that means, standard maps, basic trim on the inside, so no wood trim on the dashboard, and a software limit to 220 miles of range. What we actually ended up getting was a Standard Range Plus with a few things missing here and there. So we have power seats, we have the power steering column, we actually have the immersive audio that was supposed to be part of the Standard Range Plus, the LED fog lights that we saw up front. By all indications, we also have a 240-mile range, again 50 kilowatts usable in this battery pack. We have the power seats, and we have the premium interior trim. One thing we don't have that you'll find on most Model 3s out there, however, is floor mats. Those were not included in our particular model. Hopping into the front seats, I'm going to give these seats 9 out of 10 points. These seats remind me an awful lot of the Infiniti Q50 actually, just the way that the overall seat cushions feel. The model that we're driving also has a power steering column, as you saw there just a moment ago, but its adjustment is a little bit awkward, I think. We do have to go through a menu system in the infotainment system and then use this toggle right here on the steering wheel to actually adjust the steering wheel itself. The seats and steering wheel, along with the mirrors, are also memory linked. We have different profiles available in the vehicle. There's also an easy entry and exit, so that way it's a little bit easier to get in and out of the Model 3. Hopping into the back seat, we find 77.9 inches of combined legroom. I'm going to give these rear seats 10 out of 10 points when it comes to comparisons to other compact luxury sedans, mainly because of the headroom. We actually have about a 1/4 inch of headroom left thanks to the overall ceiling design in the Model 3. Overall legroom is very comparable to the Volvo S60 and the Genesis G70, but you will find 2 inches more legroom in the Infiniti Q50 because it is a little bit bigger overall. Speaking of bigger overall, if you're thinking about moving into something like a Model 3 from a Camry or an Accord, something like that mainstream family sedan, you should know that we have about 5 inches less legroom back here than you'll find in that Honda Accord. And it is very noticeable if I were to move my tripod that for some reason is right next to me and then sit over here on the right side of the vehicle, my knees are definitely touching this seat back. It's all the way back in its tracks. Nothing unusual about that when we talk about other luxury vehicles out there. Even something like the brand new 3 Series, which has gotten a little bit longer, is still going to have less legroom than you'll find in the average family sedan. The rear passenger area is also going to be a little bit narrower than something like a Model S or that Honda Accord. We do, however, have a fold-down armrest with 2 cup holders right there. And then the rear seats fold in a 60/40 fashion, basically flat with the trunk area back there. Tesla says that the cargo capacity of the Model 3 is 15 cubic feet combined, and that would be for the trunk and the frunk up front. But some of these numbers don't really add up in my head because this trunk appears to be around 15 cubic feet in its own right, just based on what we've been able to fit back here. It is a nice and square trunk, and if we put 22-inch roller bags in this position, you'll notice that we cannot actually close the trunk lid. It's one area where I wish this was a hatchback, but then under the load floor, we do get some additional storage space. Our 24-inch roller bag score is pretty average for a compact luxury car, but under the load floor, we were actually able to squeeze an additional 22-inch roller bag completely under that load floor, which is a nice touch. As we look around the interior, keep in mind that we are in the standard range or standard range plus, whatever you want to call this particular model. You'll notice that we do get that little speaker grill right up there, just above the A-pillar on the ceiling. That speaker exists, but is not active, as I'll show you here in a bit. We have the panoramic glass roof, which is standard on all models. It's 2 glass panels, one right there above the driver and front passenger, and the one that acts as the rear window, and then a moonroof right over the rear passengers' heads. That glass panel is part of the reason that we have such good headroom in the back, but on the other hand, this panel does not come from the factory with any kind of shade. There's been a bit of debate about that shade over at facebook.com/AlexNautos, but I do prefer a moonroof that completely closes because the sun coming through the top did bug me during our short time here so far with the Model 3, so I've actually ordered some extra tint to actually cover that up a little bit more. There is a factory accessory that you can buy, but I really think that something more along the lines of a roller cover should have been standard from the factory. We have height adjustable shoulder belts for the driver and front passenger, and then these headrests for the front passenger and the driver are not adjustable. They are just fixed into place. Instead of the cloth seats that our model was supposed to have, we actually have the vegan leather, or leatherette, depending on what you want to call it. And then if we move on over to the front doors, we have a decent proportion of soft touch materials and then some faux suede inserts right there in the middle. A nice touch on the front doors is that all of the front door, really except for that bottle holder right there in the middle, is made from a soft touch material. That's normally something that we don't find down here in the $35,000 range. Moving on over to the dashboard, we find a speaker grill right there next to the side view mirror. This speaker, again, also exists but is not active. We'll take a closer look at that in a bit. One of the key differences between the standard range plus, and then the next trim level up was supposed to be the number of speakers and the audio system. So my model was not supposed to get immersive audio, but we actually have that option. And then standard range plus was actually not supposed to get speakers in this particular position. But if I pull this off, you'll notice we actually have a speaker right there behind that grille. And if we pull down the headliner a bit here, you can see that we actually have the speaker that's integrated into the roof trim there as well. This speaker and the one in the doors are just disabled in the software. And then instead of the dark plastic trim that we were supposed to have, we actually have the wood trim that we find in Standard Range Plus and most of the other models. But if we move on over here to the infotainment system, you'll notice that we don't get the upgraded map display that we see in the higher end trims of the Model 3, so we don't have the satellite imagery here, but we do still have standard factory navigation. And it appears that this factory navigation does take into account traffic conditions around you. It just doesn't show them on the screen. The most striking feature of the Model 3 has to be this large infotainment system that is mounted onto the dashboard, sort of like a large iPad. This screen functions as both instrument cluster over here on the left and navigation and infotainment over there on the right. Tesla has really gone all in on button minimalization, some might say to kind of silly extremes. For instance, the trunk button and frunk button are right here on the touchscreen system, as well as the button to open and close the charge door right there. We also have a button to turn on and off the camera system. No 360-degree camera, just a backup camera, which I think is a little bit unusual, even though this car has so many cameras already attached to it. This is also where we would pull up things like our charging screen right there. There's a button to adjust the wiper settings. You can activate and deactivate the wipers via a button on a stalk, but if you want to adjust them, this is where you would see that adjustment right there, auto and those various intermittent modes. And finally, we have our trip computer readout right there. Now below that, we have a button to pull up our car options right there, go back to our media interface, and then pull up a few other little options right here, like our on-screen calendar, our energy screen where we can see trip readouts or our average consumption there over 5, 10, 30 minutes, etc. Things to keep in mind with this model is that we don't have XM satellite radio, we don't have AM radio, we don't have Apple CarPlay or Android Auto support, or indeed a way to access your iPhone media library any way other than Bluetooth. So there are a few limitations versus some of the other options out there in the luxury segment. Now, as you work your way on up the trim ladder, you do get things like streaming audio built into the system. The navigation interface is really one of the more interesting features here. So for instance, if I want to go to Los Angeles, this is really where the EV side of the Tesla system comes into play. You'll notice it is now finding superchargers along the way. This really is quite unique to the Tesla lineup. The car has now decided not just which superchargers we need to visit, but it's giving us an approximated charge level for each of those supercharger stations. You can also remove the charging stops if you want to. Or, for instance, if we're just simply navigating to a restaurant, for instance, if I want to go to Tortilla Flats, it'll show me how to get there. It'll show me my estimated battery charge by the time I get there, and then the estimated battery charge for a complete round-trip journey. Then when I move over to the energy screen and I choose the trip screen, it'll show me what my anticipated charge for this trip is. Same thing applies if I were to choose a longer journey, again going to Fremont, 50% charge by the time I get there, 30% charge by the time I get back. And then if I go over to my energy screen, you'll see that we are consuming power going uphill, gaining power going back downhill, and then consuming power as we go along all the way there to Fremont. And it's estimating our charge will be 52%. It will then keep this graph up and then adjust it as you drive along, so you can see how conservatively or how aggressively you're driving. One of the key differences with this system versus most EVs out there is that this is taking topography into account. And that is really obvious when you take a look at this chart right here. And not all EVs do that. So a lot of EVs will give you an expected range. They'll say whether or not you can reach the destination, but if there's a big hill in the way, then that could actually be a problem for you reaching that destination. And then it's all on you to actually work that out. Some other features worth noting is that we actually have the heated seats down here. Those were supposed to be optional. We actually have them on our quote-unquote standard range model. And if I tap these buttons down here, we have our climate control controls. Now these I find a little bit silly because instead of having manually adjusting vents, you actually have to adjust the vent here on screen. So you can see we can actually split the airflow like that and have it flow on almost either side of the steering wheel if I pinch that all the way out, and then you could adjust the flow up and down. I wish I just had a manual vent that was a little bit more easy to adjust. Same thing over here on the passenger side, we can pinch them together or adjust them up and down right like that. Now it is worth noting that the air vents for the rear seat passengers, those are more traditional air vents. If I zoom out from there a little bit, that dark slot right above the wood trim, that's the air vent right there. And you can't actually see any of those elements moving in there, and you can't hear them either. It's a really nicely done system. I just think it's a little bit silly. Going back to the screen for just one moment, this is where we find the memory buttons for the seats and the mirrors. They call that those profiles right there. We also have built-in Wi-Fi right there and the built-in Bluetooth option right there for selecting your Bluetooth phone. And then if I hit the T button, that's where we find information about the Tesla and then some of those Easter eggs that they love to include. Opening the glove box is done right here in the infotainment screen. That opens the glove box over there on that side. I was not able to fit a larger tablet computer inside, but some of the smaller ones may fit. Immediately below the screen, we have two storage areas. One right here where you can store your smartphones. There's enough room for two of those larger phones to be stacked sort of right like that. Now, there is a way you can pull up some USB charge cables right there, but personally I didn't find that very useful. The wireless charging mat option I think would definitely be a better thing to go for. Behind this door right here, we find a deeper storage well, and then we can lift this up and have access to that complete area where you could definitely put 2-liter bottles, perhaps a gallon of milk, definitely large purses in there. There are also two USB ports right there. One is attached to this longer cable, the other one is fed through this little phone stand right there, which again, I don't find terribly useful. Behind this area, we have two large cup holders, easily able to accommodate large takeout drinks, and then a softly padded center armrest. This opens to reveal another large storage cubby. Not able to fit quite a gallon of milk in there, but it is definitely deeper than you might think. Definitely deeper than the average luxury sedan because there's no drive shaft down there. And then there's a different storage tier we can put right in there for your smaller knickknacks. I don't typically comment on sun visors, but I do find these a little interesting because we have this magnetic cover right there to the vanity mirror, kind of like a roller cover on an iPad. That is kind of a unique touch right there. These do slide side to side, but they don't really cover very much of the windscreen. I do wish these were a little bit larger. I also wish that somehow I could use them to cover that panoramic roof up there. A lot of folks wanted me to talk about fit and finish. There are a few issues with the Model 3 right here. We do have the door seal right here that is not quite fitting right. Interestingly enough, it actually fits properly on 2 of the doors, but not 2 of the other doors, and there's no real rhyme or reason. So the passenger side up front is okay. The driver's side right here is a little bit pinchy. Aside from that, I really haven't had any interior parts complaints. There are a few seams that could be a little bit better done, but really nothing out of the ordinary. You'd see something similar in your average Lincoln out there. And then on the outside, there have been a few paint concerns, but again, that's something that we have seen in Tesla before, so I'm not going to belabor the point. If you're going to buy a Tesla, you probably already know about that. The steering wheel is a round 3-spoke design. We have some moderate sport grips up top, and then just 2 contextual button modules. These toggle side to side and then roll up and down. At the moment, this one is set to adjust the steering wheel. So you can see in, out, and then up and down. Depending on the drive mode, this one would also be used for adjusting your infotainment system volume and track forward backward. And then this one could be used for the cruise control system. As I said before, Tesla has taken button minimalization kind of to an extreme. So over here on the left side of the steering column, we have a turn signal stalk with 1 button at the end that both wipes the windshield and activates the windshield wipers. Once activated, you would then adjust their speed via the touchscreen in the infotainment system. On the other side of the steering wheel, we have a column shifter stalk, very similar to Mercedes column shifters. It is a joystick style, so it returns to center. We pull down for drive. You can see it's going to adjust my seat and steering wheel there. We then push up for reverse. Neutral is 1 slight toggle between in either direction. Now, once we're in drive, if you want to activate the cruise control, we simply toggle it down again to turn on the cruise control. If you want to disable the cruise control, we push up to drive again. And then if we want to park the car, we simply press the P button at the end of the stalk. One thing you'll notice we do not have in here, however, is a start-stop button. That's something that Tesla has completely removed from the vehicle. Here's how it works. You approach the vehicle, you open the vehicle, it turns on. Then we pull down to drive and it turns on the drive mode so that you can actually move the car. I will go ahead and ignore that particular warning right there. And then we could just drive the car forward. When we're done, we simply press the P button and then we leave the car. And then once the car is completely locked, closed, etc., then it will actually fully turn off. Some people may like this, some people may not. I'm a little bit torn still because I do think it's really easy. It does take a little bit of getting used to, but then on the other hand, your tunes are still playing when you've parked the car and you've gotten out of it, and then you close the doors and then they turn off a little bit later. As you may have noticed, we have finally finished our interior overview, and this video is almost as long as our traditional complete review. So I decided to split this into a 2-part video, the part you just watched, and then a part that contains our pricing comparisons and, of course, the all-important drive section. We will be finishing that video up just as soon as possible. It should be out tomorrow, so if you're watching this on the release day, you won't see a button on your screen to click on over to that video, but if you're watching it later, then just click on over to that second part right now. As always, click on over to facebook.com/AlexNauto so you can see what we're driving this week, and of course, what I'm doing with the Model 3 right now. If you haven't already done so, hit that subscribe button down there at the bottom of your screen because that is the best way to stay up to date on all of our latest videos.